Before we start today's subject, just a quick intro from Kinsey Tech. We want you to know that all the videos that we have on Python, the code that we use is downloadable. So if you go to kinseytech.com and then you can choose the courses, in this case, Python, or you could just go straight to kinseytech.com/course/Python. You'll find the chapters, you'll find the lessons. You can take the course, which is absolutely free. And then within each lesson, you can click on, you'll find a document where you can click and download it, and you'll find whether there is websites or links or any code segments, you can download them absolutely free. Enjoy the journey. Hello and welcome. In this session, we're going to talk about variables in Python. Assuming we haven't worked with variables before or any kind of programming, why do I need variables or what are variables? Programs usually deal with data. Usually people are entering data or reading data from a file, and then we're doing something with that data. For example, let's say I'm doing a grading program for an instructor. You're a professor and I'm writing a program for you so that all you have to do is enter a grade. And if the grade is between, let's say, 90 to 100, the student gets an A. If it's between 80 to 89, they get a B. So basically the input is going to be numbers. In this case, I need to declare my variable. So whatever grade I'm entering, whatever mark I'm entering, it's going to be a number. We call that an integer in this case, or a float if there's decimal points. Or sometimes, for example, I have a field or a file that I'm reading that has first name and last name. But in your case, you want to combine them into one field. You just want to have full name. So whatever the first name, you enter your first name, you enter your last name, and then I want to bring them together. So what I'm dealing with here is no longer, let's say Mike Smith or Michael Smith. It's no longer a number, or integer, float. In this case, it's a string and a string. So variable is basically the kind of data that we're dealing with, and we always want to identify what type it is. People have done programming before. You usually have to do what's called is declaration. You need to declare it. You need to say X or grade is going to be an integer, so you can only accept numbers. Or first name or last name is going to be a string. You can only expect alphanumeric string values in there. The nice thing about Python is our variables are done differently. It's done automatically. As we're going to go ahead and jump into this and see it together. So for us that are new to programming, it's going to be straightforward. For us that have done some programming before, we need to be aware that Python has no command for declaring a variable. A variable in Python is created the moment you first assign a value to it. So for example, let's type in x is equal to 5. So now notice if I type in print x, let's go ahead and run it. It understands that that's an integer, and when we run it, it's going to put out the integer. So it's automatically populated there. Let's go ahead and have fun and add something else. We're going to put, because this is alphanumeric or a text or a string, we're going to type in, let's give it a name of a person, Michael, and run it. Need to print y. Sure enough, we have that x is an integer and it's equal to 5, and y that it printed out is a string and it's equal to Michael. So a variable is created the moment you first assign it a value in Python. Let's go a step further. This time we're going to add something that we use a lot in programming in our syntax, which is comments. A lot of times we want to remember what we're doing, so we just want to add a note. So anything that starts with a hashtag such as this one, it means that it's a comment. It means the program is not going to read it. This is for me, the developer, to read it, but the program itself is not going to look at it as part of the code. So it's just for our own notes. So for our notes, we're going to type in that x is of type integer and y is of type string. Again, notice the comment is not changing anything with our code. This is just for us. So anything from the beginning of this sign till the end of it is just a comment for us to read it. Now, there's an interesting thing that we can do, and that is called casting. So if you want to specify the data type of a variable, this can be done by casting. So let's take an example of casting. We're going to type in x is equal to 3. And we're just going to put a comment so we all know what we just did. Will be 3. And notice between quotes because it's a string. So we forced it to be a string, even though by default it looks as an integer, but we're saying, no, no, no. We want X to be a string. We're forcing it to be a string. So that's called casting. Similarly, we could put Y is equal to 3 as an integer. And now we've forced Y will be 3. And suppose we want to force it to have a decimal point. Then what are we going to do? We're going to put a float is equal to 3. So Z will be 3.0. Now, just to make sure that that's the case, let's go ahead and do this. Print Y and print Z. And you can see because we forced it to be a string, went in there, even though the values are 3, but it's looking at it as a string, so I can't multiply this by a number, for instance. But I can concatenate it or join it with another string. Similarly, we have this here defined as an integer. So it's an integer. And even though it's a 3, but we declared it as a float or casted it as a float or forced it to be a float. So that's why it has a 3.0, even though we entered it as a 3 because of the casting. Now, sometimes I want to know what the type of my data is. So you can get the data type of a variable with a type function. Let's look at what the type function is. I'm going to type X is equal to 5. Y is equal to John. Now let's print the type of X. Now let's print the type of Y. So let's run this. And it's telling us that X is an integer and Y is a string. So anytime you need to know, depending on different codes that we're running, at what time we're running certain functionalities, you can use the type function to find out the definition or the type of variable that you're using. Now we get to an interesting point, and that is single or double quotes. String variables can be declared either by using single or double quotes. Again, string variables, we can declare them in Python either with single or double quotes. So let's take an example of X is equal to John. Y is equal to Michael. But with Michael, we're going to go with single quotes. And then let's go ahead and print X and print Y. Oops, sorry. So notice that our string variable can be declared either by using a single quote or double quote around it. One thing that's also important to know is that in Python, variable names are case sensitive. Variable names are case sensitive. So if we have X is equal to John and then capital X is equal to Michael, so smaller case is John, capital uppercase is Michael. Let's go ahead and try and print those two. So notice it sees them as two different variables. In some languages, there's no case sensitivity, but in the case of Python, there is that case sensitivity. So we want to be aware of it. All right. So that kind of summarizes kind of our introduction to variables. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll continue our journey. Thank you. Thank you for joining us in today's session. We hope that you enjoyed it, and we'd like to invite you to a lot of our free sessions. Simply visit our website at kinseytech.com/events. Thank you again.